Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Code Your English, the channel where we don't just learn vocabulary, we learn how to think, feel, and express ourselves like fluent, confident speakers of this beautiful language. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the family. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, episode after episode, to grow with us. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to ask you a small favor. If you find value in what we do here, please take a moment to subscribe to Code Your English on YouTube, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from today. It genuinely means the world to me, and it helps this channel reach more learners just like you, all around the globe. Today, we are exploring a topic that touches every single one of us, no matter where we come from, what language we speak, or what stage of life we're in. We're talking about something invisible, yet incredibly powerful. Something that can open doors or quietly hold us back without us even realizing it. Today, my friends, we are talking about the psychology of confidence. This is not going to be a simple, surface-level conversation. We are going deep. We're going to challenge what you think you know about confidence. We're going to explore where it actually comes from, why some people seem to have it effortlessly, while others struggle silently, and most importantly, how you can build real, lasting confidence. Not the fake, performative kind, but the kind that comes from within and stays with you for life. So, get comfortable, maybe grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let's begin this journey together. What is confidence, really? Let me start with a question that I want you to genuinely sit with for a moment. Have you ever met someone who walked into a room and instantly commanded attention? Someone who spoke with such ease, such apparent self-assurance, that everyone around them seemed to lean in and listen. And then, perhaps weeks or months later, you discovered that this very same person, this person who seemed so unshakable on the outside, was actually struggling with deep insecurity on the inside. Maybe they doubted their own worth. Maybe they lay awake at night replaying conversations, wondering if they had said the wrong thing. This contradiction is far more common than most people realize, and it tells us something crucial about confidence. It is rarely what it appears to be on the surface. On the other end of the spectrum, think about someone you know who is quiet, perhaps even shy in social settings. Someone who doesn't seek attention or dominate conversations. And yet, underneath that calm exterior, there is a remarkable inner strength, a quiet resilience that allows them to handle adversity, make difficult decisions, and stay true to their values even when no one is watching. This person may never be described as the most confident person in the room, yet in many ways they embody confidence far more authentically than the loud extrovert who performs self-assurance like a costume. So, what does this contrast teach us? It teaches us that confidence is widely misunderstood. Many people associate confidence with loudness, with charisma, with the ability to dominate a room or never show a flicker of doubt. But real confidence, the kind that psychologists actually study and that genuinely transforms lives, is something far deeper, far quieter, and far more sustainable than mere external performance. Confidence is not a personality trait that some lucky people are simply born with, while others are unfortunately denied. Instead, confidence is best understood as a psychological process, something dynamic, something that is built, shaped, challenged, tested, and ultimately strengthened over time through experience, reflection, and deliberate effort. This reframing matters enormously because if you currently believe that confidence is a fixed trait, something you either have or don't have, then you are essentially telling yourself a story that limits your own growth. But if you understand confidence as a skill, as a muscle that can be trained and developed, then suddenly the entire conversation changes. Suddenly, your current lack of confidence in a particular area of your life isn't a permanent verdict on who you are. It's simply evidence that this particular muscle hasn't been exercised yet. And that, my friends, is an incredibly liberating idea. Throughout today's episode, I want you to keep asking yourself two simple but profound questions. First, have you ever doubted yourself even when you were fully capable of succeeding? And second, have you ever pretended to feel confident on the outside while feeling completely uncertain on the inside? If your honest answer to either of these questions is yes, then congratulations. You are completely, wonderfully human, and you are exactly the person this episode was made for. Confidence versus insecurity. The hidden inner battle. Now let's go a little deeper, because here is a truth that often surprises people. Confidence and insecurity are not opposites that exist on opposite ends of a spectrum, with you standing firmly on one side or the other. Instead, confidence and insecurity frequently coexist within the very same person, often within the very same moment. Even individuals who appear remarkably successful, accomplished entrepreneurs, celebrated artists, respected leaders, continue to wrestle privately with self-doubt, with the nagging fear that they are not truly good enough, or that one day everyone around them will somehow discover that they don't deserve their achievements. Psychologists sometimes refer to this experience as imposter syndrome, and it is far more widespread than most people would ever admit publicly. This brings us to one of the most important reframes in this entire episode. Confidence is not the absence of fear. Let me repeat that, because it is genuinely transformative once it clicks. Confidence is not the absence of fear, anxiety, or self-doubt. Rather, confidence is the willingness and the ability to move forward, to take action, to show up fully, despite the presence of that fear. The person giving a powerful speech in front of hundreds of people might have a racing heart and trembling hands moments before stepping onto that stage. The difference between them and someone who avoids public speaking entirely is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to walk forward anyway. This is precisely why our internal dialogue matters so profoundly. Think for a moment about what your inner voice actually sounds like when you're under pressure. When you're about to walk into a job interview, when you're about to send an important message, when you're facing a challenge that genuinely scares you. Does that inner voice speak to you with encouragement, reminding you of your past successes and your capability to handle difficulty? Or does it speak to you with harsh criticism, magnifying your flaws, and reminding you of every past failure, every moment of embarrassment, every reason you might fail again? For so many people, this internal dialogue becomes a hidden battlefield. On one side, there's a part of you that genuinely wants to grow, to take risks, to pursue meaningful goals. On the other side, there's a protective, fear-driven part of you that wants to keep you safe by keeping you small, by convincing you to avoid anything uncertain or potentially humiliating. This is the fear of judgment in its purest form, the deep, almost primal worry about what others will think of us, whether we will be accepted or rejected, whether we are worthy of respect and belonging. Understanding this internal conflict is itself a form of emotional resilience. Once you recognize that your anxious inner voice is not the enemy, but simply an overprotective part of your psychology trying, in its clumsy way, to keep you safe, you can begin to relate to it differently. Instead of being controlled by that voice, you can learn to acknowledge it, thank it for trying to protect you, and then make a conscious choice to act anyway. This is precisely what genuine confidence looks like in practice. Not the elimination of self-doubt, but a mature, compassionate relationship with it. Where confidence comes from: childhood, experiences, and conditioning. To truly understand confidence, we need to look further back, much further back, in fact, than most adults ever consciously think to look. We need to look at childhood, because this is where the earliest, deepest roots of our self-perception are planted. The experiences we have as children, the praise we received, the criticism we absorbed, the failures we endured, and the comparisons we were constantly subjected to, all of these shape the foundational beliefs we carry about ourselves, often without our conscious awareness, well into adulthood. Consider, for instance, a child who is repeatedly praised only for achievement, for getting the highest grades, for winning competitions, for being the best in the class. On the surface, this praise might seem entirely positive and supportive. But psychologically, this child may begin to internalize a dangerous belief that their worth as a human being is conditional, dependent entirely on their performance and accomplishments. Years later, as an adult, this same person might struggle profoundly with anxiety and perfectionism, terrified of failure, not because failure itself is so catastrophic, but because failure feels like a direct threat to their fundamental sense of worth. Now consider a different child, one who was frequently compared unfavorably to siblings, classmates, or cousins, told they should be more like someone else, more talented, more outgoing, more disciplined. This child may grow into an adult who constantly measures their own value against other people, who feels a persistent, exhausting sense of not being enough, regardless of their actual accomplishments. This is what psychologists call social comparison, and it can become a deeply ingrained habit that quietly sabotages confidence for an entire lifetime. This is precisely how psychological conditioning works. Through repetition, through emotionally significant experiences, and through the messages, both spoken and unspoken, that we absorb from parents, teachers, and our broader social environment, we gradually develop what are known as core beliefs. These are the foundational assumptions we hold about who we are, what we deserve, and what we are capable of. And the truly fascinating and sometimes unsettling part is that many of us are walking around as fully grown adults, making major life decisions, while still being quietly governed by beliefs that were formed when we were 5, 7, or 10 years old. This is where identity formation becomes so essential to understand. Our sense of self, our identity, is not something fixed and unchangeable that we were simply born with. It is, instead, something constructed gradually over time, layer by layer, through the accumulation of countless small experiences and the meanings we attach to them. The wonderful implication of this is that if identity can be constructed, it can also be reconstructed. The limiting beliefs that were planted in childhood are not permanent sentences. They are simply patterns, and patterns with awareness and intentional effort can absolutely be rewritten. So I want to invite you, right now, to pause and genuinely reflect. What messages about yourself did you absorb growing up? Were you told, directly or indirectly, that you were capable, intelligent, and worthy of love regardless of your performance? Or were you told, even subtly, that you needed to earn your worth, that you weren't quite good enough as you were, that you needed to change something fundamental about yourself to be acceptable? And more importantly, which of these old beliefs are you still unconsciously carrying with you today? Decades later, perhaps influencing decisions you make without you even realizing their origin. The psychology of self-talk. Your mind is always listening. Let's now move into one of the most powerful and practical concepts in this entire episode: the psychology of self-talk. Here is something profound that I want you to truly absorb. Your brain is constantly listening to what you repeatedly tell yourself, and over time, it begins to treat those repeated thoughts not as opinions or passing feelings, but as objective facts about reality. This is an extraordinarily important mechanism to understand, because it means that the words you use internally, day after day, are quietly constructing the very identity you live inside of. Think about the cognitive patterns that run through your mind during an ordinary day. When you make a small mistake, what is your immediate internal reaction? Do you think something like, "That's okay? Everyone makes mistakes? I'll learn from this and do better next time"? Or does your mind immediately jump to something harsher, something like, "I always mess things up. I'm so incompetent. Why can't I ever get anything right?" These two internal reactions might seem like minor, momentary thoughts, but when repeated across thousands of small moments over months and years, they create dramatically different psychological outcomes. This is what we mean by mental programming. Just as a computer follows the instructions written into its code, your mind, in many ways, follows the instructions you repeatedly feed it through self-talk. If you consistently tell yourself that you are not good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough, your brain will diligently search for evidence to confirm this belief while simultaneously filtering out or minimizing any evidence that might contradict it. This is sometimes called confirmation bias, and it is one of the most powerful and most overlooked forces shaping our self-perception. The good news, however, is that this same mechanism works equally well in the opposite direction if you begin to consciously, deliberately shift your self-talk. Not through empty, unconvincing positive affirmations, but through honest, balanced, compassionate internal dialogue, you begin to retrain your brain to notice evidence of your own capability, resilience, and growth. This is closely connected to emotional regulation, which refers to our ability to manage and respond to our emotional experiences in healthy, constructive ways, rather than being completely controlled or overwhelmed by them. I want you to genuinely consider this. What phrases do you find yourself repeating during difficult moments? Is it something like, "I can handle this, even if it's uncomfortable"? Or is it something closer to, "I always fail at things like this"? Pay close attention this week to the specific language you use internally when challenges arise. You might be surprised, and perhaps even a little uncomfortable, to discover just how harsh, repetitive, and unhelpful some of these automatic thoughts have become. But simply noticing them, bringing them into conscious awareness, is the essential first step toward changing them. Why action builds confidence. Not just positive thinking. Now here's where we move from understanding the mind to actually changing your life, because awareness alone, while necessary, is never sufficient. So many people fall into the trap of believing that confidence can be achieved purely through positive thinking, through repeating affirmations in the mirror each morning, through reading inspirational quotes, through consuming endless motivational content. And while these practices certainly aren't harmful, they are dramatically incomplete on their own, because genuine, lasting confidence is built primarily through one thing: action. Here's the psychological mechanism behind this. Confidence is fundamentally earned through evidence. Your subconscious mind doesn't simply believe something because you've repeated it to yourself in your head. It believes something because you've demonstrated it through real, lived experience. Every single time you take action despite fear, every time you speak up in a meeting despite the anxiety, every time you start a conversation with a stranger despite the awkwardness, every time you attempt a new skill despite the very real risk of looking foolish. You are providing your brain with concrete evidence that you are capable, that you can survive discomfort, and that you can grow stronger through challenge. This is precisely why avoidance is so dangerous to long-term confidence, even though, in the short term, avoidance feels so deeply relieving. When you avoid a frightening situation, your anxiety decreases immediately, and this immediate relief feels wonderful in the moment. But psychologically, this avoidance sends a damaging message to your subconscious. This situation truly is as dangerous and unbearable as I feared, and I am not capable of handling it. Over time, repeated avoidance doesn't protect your confidence. It actively erodes it, making the feared situation feel even more threatening the next time you encounter it. This is closely related to a concept psychologists call exposure, originally developed in the treatment of anxiety disorders, but profoundly applicable to everyday confidence building. Exposure simply means gradually, intentionally putting yourself in situations that feel uncomfortable, allowing yourself to experience that discomfort without escaping it, and discovering, through direct experience, that you can survive it, and often that the outcome was far less catastrophic than your anxious mind had predicted. This is sometimes described as growth through discomfort, and it represents one of the most reliable pathways toward authentic, embodied confidence. Think about the practical, everyday opportunities you have for this kind of growth. Speaking up during a meeting, even when your heart is racing. Starting a conversation with someone new at a social event, even when you feel awkward and uncertain about what to say. Practicing public speaking, even in small, low-stakes settings, gradually building your tolerance for the discomfort of being watched and evaluated. Learning a completely new skill, perhaps even learning English, the very language you're listening to right now, and allowing yourself to make mistakes publicly as a necessary part of the learning process. Each of these actions, repeated consistently over time, becomes a brick in the foundation of genuine, durable confidence. This is behavioral reinforcement in its most practical form. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. And belief creates further action. Confidence killers: comparison, perfectionism, and fear of judgment. Now let's turn our attention to the forces that actively work against confidence. The patterns that quietly, persistently undermine our sense of self-worth, often without us even realizing they're happening. I call these confidence killers, and three of the most powerful and pervasive ones are comparison, perfectionism, and the fear of judgment. Let's start with comparison. In our current era of social media, where curated highlight reels of other people's lives are constantly, endlessly available at our fingertips, comparison has become almost unavoidable. We scroll through images of other people's apparent success, their seemingly perfect relationships, their impressive achievements, and almost involuntarily, our minds begin measuring our own messy, complicated, ordinary lives against these polished, filtered fragments of someone else's reality. This is what we might call social pressure in its most modern, digital form, and it steals an enormous amount of peace from people who might otherwise feel genuinely content with their own lives and progress. Then there's perfectionism, which might initially sound like a positive trait. After all, who wouldn't want to do excellent work? But psychologically, perfectionism often functions very differently from healthy striving for excellence. Perfectionism frequently creates paralysis, because if your standard for acceptable performance is absolute perfection, then any attempt that might result in imperfection, which, realistically, includes almost every attempt at anything genuinely difficult or new, feels too risky to even begin. This is closely connected to what psychologists call performance anxiety, an intense fear specifically related to being evaluated and potentially found inadequate. And finally, there's the fear of judgment, which is perhaps the deepest and most universal confidence killer of all. This is the persistent, often exhausting worry about what others think of us, whether we will be accepted, respected, admired, or, conversely, rejected, mocked, or dismissed. This fear is closely tied to a pattern called approval seeking, in which we begin shaping our decisions, our opinions, even our personalities around what we believe will earn us the approval of others, rather than around our own authentic values and desires. This often leads to overthinking, where we spend exhausting amounts of mental energy replaying past interactions or rehearsing future ones, desperately trying to control how we are perceived. I want to leave you with two genuinely important reflection questions here. First, whose validation are you currently chasing? And have you ever stopped to ask yourself whether that person's opinion truly deserves the enormous psychological space you're giving it? And second, what would fundamentally change in your life, in your decisions, in your daily behavior, if you simply stopped trying to impress everyone around you and instead focused your energy on living in alignment with your own deepest values? The body-mind connection. Confidence is psychological and physical. Here's something that many people overlook entirely when thinking about confidence. Confidence is not purely a mental or psychological phenomenon. It is deeply, inseparably embodied. Your physical body and your psychological state exist in constant, bidirectional communication, each one continuously influencing the other. This is the foundation of what researchers call embodied cognition, the understanding that our thoughts and emotions are not isolated within our minds alone, but are profoundly shaped by our physical posture, movement, and bodily sensations. Consider, for example, the simple act of posture. When you stand tall, with your shoulders relaxed but open, your chest naturally lifted, and your head held level, you send a specific set of signals through your nervous system that genuinely influence your emotional state, often within seconds. Conversely, when you slouch, with your shoulders curved inward and your gaze directed downward, you send an entirely different set of signals, ones associated with submission, low energy, and diminished presence. This isn't merely metaphorical. It reflects genuine, measurable physiological changes in your body's stress response and hormonal activity. This connection extends powerfully to the way we use our eyes, our voice, and our breath. Sustained, comfortable eye contact during conversation communicates presence and self-assurance, both to the person you're speaking with and, remarkably, back to your own nervous system. The tone, pace, and volume of your voice similarly shapes both how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself in that moment. And breathing, something so automatic that we rarely give it conscious attention, plays an enormous role in regulating our nervous system's stress response. Slow, deep, deliberate breathing activates the body's calming mechanisms, while shallow, rapid breathing tends to intensify feelings of anxiety and threat. This is why body language matters so much more than most people realize when it comes to confidence. It's not about performing confidence artificially, like wearing a mask, but about understanding that small, intentional physical adjustments, standing taller, breathing more slowly and deeply, making genuine eye contact, speaking with measured, steady pacing, can create real, measurable shifts in your internal psychological state. Confidence, in this sense, can be cultivated not only from the inside out, through mindset and self-talk, but also from the outside in, through deliberate physical practice. This is genuinely fascinating because it means you have far more practical, immediate tools available to you than you might have previously realized. Building real confidence, small wins, self-trust, and consistency. Now, let's talk about the practical pathway forward. Because understanding confidence intellectually is valuable, but it must eventually translate into a sustainable daily practice if it's going to genuinely transform your life. The foundation of lasting confidence is something psychologists call self-trust. And self-trust is built, quite simply, through the accumulation of promises kept to yourself over time. Think about what happens in any meaningful relationship when one person consistently breaks their promises to another. When they say they'll show up and then don't. When they say they'll follow through and then quietly abandon their commitment. Trust in that relationship inevitably erodes. The exact same dynamic occurs internally, within your relationship with yourself. Every time you tell yourself you'll do something, wake up early, complete a task, follow through on a commitment, speak up when you intended to, and then you don't follow through, you are quietly teaching yourself that your own word cannot be relied upon. And conversely, every single time you do follow through, even on something small, you are depositing evidence into an internal account of self-trust that compounds slowly but powerfully over time. This is precisely why small wins matter so enormously, far more than most people initially appreciate. We often imagine that confidence is built through dramatic, monumental achievements, landing the perfect job, achieving extraordinary success, receiving public recognition. But in reality, sustainable confidence is built almost entirely through small, consistent, often unglamorous actions, repeated day after day, showing up to practice a skill even when motivation is low, speaking one sentence in a foreign language even when you're afraid of making mistakes, completing a small task you committed to even when no one would notice if you skipped it. This leads us naturally to the principle of consistency, and consistency is genuinely where transformation happens. Discipline, in this context, isn't about harsh self-punishment or rigid perfectionism. It's simply the practice of continuing to show up for your own growth, even on days when it feels difficult, uninspiring, or inconvenient. Over months and years, this consistent discipline gradually produces what psychologists call identity shifts, meaning you don't just do confident things occasionally. You genuinely begin to become a fundamentally more confident person because your repeated actions have reshaped your underlying self-concept. So here are 2 reflection questions worth sitting with seriously. First, can you honestly trust yourself right now, based on your recent track record of following through on commitments you've made to yourself? And second, do your daily actions genuinely align with the values and goals you claim to hold? Or is there a noticeable, uncomfortable gap between what you say you want and what you actually, consistently do? As we bring this episode to a close, I want to offer you a final, hopefully transformative reframe of everything we've discussed today. Confidence is not perfection. It is not some final destination where self-doubt magically disappears forever, where you suddenly feel completely certain in every situation for the rest of your life. That version of confidence simply doesn't exist, and chasing it will only lead to frustration and disappointment. Confidence is also not constant. Even the most genuinely self-assured people you know experience fluctuating waves of doubt, uncertainty, and insecurity, depending on the situation, their current stress levels, and the specific challenges they're facing. What separates genuinely confident people from those who feel chronically stuck is not the absence of these waves, but their willingness to keep showing up again and again, regardless of how they happen to feel in any given moment. So here is the final message I want you to carry with you, long after this episode ends. Confidence is not about never doubting yourself. It is about refusing to let that doubt control your decisions, your behavior, and ultimately, your life. It is about acknowledging fear, acknowledging insecurity, acknowledging the very human, very normal voice of self-doubt that whispers in all of our minds. And then, despite all of that, choosing to take the next step forward anyway. I want to leave you with two final reflection questions, ones I genuinely hope you'll continue thinking about long after you finish listening today. Who could you become if fear stopped making your decisions for you? And what would meaningfully change in your life, starting today, if you simply trusted yourself a little bit more? Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on Code Your English. I hope this episode gave you not only valuable English vocabulary and natural expressions to add to your own speaking and writing, but also something far more important: a genuinely useful new way of understanding yourself and your own psychology. If this episode resonated with you in any way, please consider subscribing to Code Your English so you never miss a future episode. And please share this with a friend who might need to hear this message today. Leave a comment below and tell me, which part of today's conversation spoke to you the most? I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to hear your reflections. Until next time, keep showing up. Keep practicing your English with courage rather than perfectionism. And remember, confidence isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, one honest, imperfect action at a time. This has been Code Your English. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.